Happy Friday! It is the first Friday of the month, which means that it is Sexy First Friday. And I am just waiting for Sam to join. And here she is. So let's hope that we can get her in without any problem. All right, just a second here. It's not letting me, it's telling me that you're joined, but it says no requests, Sam. So let me, okay. All right, I just invited you, Sam, so hopefully that works as well. Let me know if there's any issue with that, because I did just invite you in as well, but it's not letting me approve your request. So hopefully that works. If we're having some issues, I will have to kind of go out and go back in. All right, inviting again. Let's see. Goes in. All right, I'm gonna, oh, there you are. I was just gonna hop off because I'm like, is it gonna work? Is it not gonna work today? Who knows, right?
Good thing we started
Welcome.
early.
I know that's why I wanted to start early, just because we know that we tend to have some technical issues. Well, welcome everybody. It's the first Friday of the month, and we are excited to be here today. Today's topic is going to be about relationship-oriented thinking, but we'll go in just introducing ourselves again. Many of you already know us, but sometimes we get some new people to hop on, and so introduce ourselves quickly, and then kind of get right into what the topic is today. So my name is Lindsay Frazier. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified sex therapist, an IA accredited professional out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I have a private practice where I specialize in relationships and sexuality. Why don't you share a little bit about yourself, Sam?
Hi, I'm Sam E Greenberg. I'm a sexuality researcher and Enneagram coach focused on sexuality and relationships.
Well, welcome everybody. So today's topic actually comes out of, I don't know if those of you that have been following me, but I've been talking a little bit about like, how do you have relationship oriented thinking? So I'll just define that a little bit and talk about what I do in my practice with clients. And then Sam and I decided to put our own little twist on it and add in some Enneagram, sexuality, and relationship stuff because we see different types and instinctual stackings do this very different ways and how we can be more relationship oriented. So when we think about relationships, what we actually want to think about is that the relationship or the couple itself is kind of its own entity. And I think this goes a lot against sort of the thoughts that we have, especially in Western society where it's more individualistic focused. And we don't actually often think about the relationship being its own little entity. And so one of the things that I often say in my practice is that we want to make our decisions and choices based on what's best for the relationship. And when we think about this, what this means is sometimes what's best for me, sometimes that's what's best for my partner, and sometimes it's a compromise. And really, it's knowing the difference and asking ourselves that question when we make decisions and choices. So when we're thinking about what's best for the relationship, sometimes that might be something that is in my own self-interest that's going to benefit us. Sometimes that might be what's in our partner's best interest, and that might benefit us. And sometimes it's more of that compromising. And one of the things that Sam and I realized is that she was already doing this too with her coaching clients, maybe not having the same language, but we just wanted to bring in like how important it is to have healthy relationships and to have this stance or this thought when we're thinking about how we make our decisions and choices. Why don't you share a little bit about what this looks like in your practice with your coaching clients, Sam?
Sure, and I love this model and a small addition I'll say to what you said is sometimes what's best for the relationship is what's best for neither individual. That would be more rare, but where both individuals are doing, with sort of what they don't want to do, but that's what's best for the relationship. So yes, I do use this in coaching. And for me, it's like there's 3 points that you can focus on with transformation in a relational context. You can focus on one of the two people in the relationship, in a dyadic relationship, or the other. But then you can focus on this third point, which is that we're not changing me or you, we're changing the balance and the dynamics in this third entity that is our relationship entity, like you said. Sort of similarly, like in transactional analysis, there's like me looking at you looking at me, but then there's this idea there's a third perspective, like an objective perspective looking at us, and that all of those are equally real. It's not, that the relationship entity is an imagined entity, it's a real entity. So I do use that as well, with transformative work.
And we thought that additionally to start, we kind of focus on how this shows up in instincts. And because I'm a social dominant, I'm going to say some of the things that maybe us socials don't do so well about putting the relationship first. In the sense that we can be more focused, especially if your sexual instinct repressed, more focused on sort of that group and that connection and that belonging, that sometimes we aren't putting the attention to the relationship itself. The interesting thing about this, though, too, is you also need to have social connections outside of the relationship to have a healthy, balanced relationship. So it becomes, again, really understanding sort of what are we doing and are we making these decisions and choices based on what's best for the relationship. So balance is important. We each need to have our individual identities as well as our couple identity, which means that it is really important that you have social connections outside of your relationship. But if you're overly focused there, so one of the complaints that I've gotten, which I will share, is that like when I'm in a social situation with partners, sometimes what I can do is I can be overly focused on all the other people that are at a gathering. So, touching point, making sure everybody's needs are being met at that gathering, that sometimes I might neglect my partner a little bit and I'm not touching that touch point with them and making sure that they're feeling included and they're connected. And so in this situation, if I'm thinking about what's best for the relationship, really what I'm going to do is it's going to be a little bit of both of those, right? Like I'm going to be making sure that I get those connections in that group, but I'm also going to be making sure that I have that touch point with my partner so that they also feel included and seen and recognize that our partnership is important to them. What kind of things would you add anything for social, or do you think I got that pretty well, Sam?
Yeah, that was great. I guess just reiterating, for a relationship, any healthy relationship, generally we want to see a social role for that relationship, like that relationship is embedded in a system of friends, of family, of community. So that is an important part of a healthy relationship, like you said. And then we see our social dominance overemphasizing that, and our social blinds or social repressed people under emphasizing it. So for what's best for the relationship might be, in that type of relationship, a little bit of a stretch for both people to come to a balance. I also wanted to talk about another example, which would be like a self-preservation repressed example. And I guess I'm using myself as a guinea pig here too. But in a healthy relationship, we want to see some self-preservation things attended to. We want to see a healthy relationship. We want to see like a budget, savings, financial savings, if you can, a will, paying your bills on time, having a functioning vehicle. These are important for a relationship to function in most cases. And for self-preservation repressed person, focusing on that stuff feels like it's not what's best for me, in the sense of it's not what's most comfortable. It's not what I'm good at. When I do focus on those things, it triggers like this feeling of incompetence as a 5 because I'm not good at those things. So it's not bad for me per se. It's good for me, but it's a big stretch and it's not something I want to spend my time on, but it's essential for, a healthy functioning relationship. So the relationship needs those things, not just me personally. I guess that's another instinct example. Do we want to move to some type examples?
Yeah, let's move to some type examples. And I think you were going to talk about the assertive types and withdrawal types, so we can kind of start in that a little bit. And if you want to just refresh for people what those types are, that would be
Yes.
great too.
So that's When we were working on this topic, this is what comes to mind for me the most for type is assertive versus withdrawn types. So yeah, just as a reminder, the withdrawing types are 4, 5, and 9, and assertive types are 3, 7, and 8. And then we get our compliant types, which are 1, 2, and 6, which are almost like a combination of assertive and withdrawing. Those are stances, meaning when I, as a 5 in the withdrawing stance, feel threatened or upset, stressed, I'm going to withdraw away or into myself to feel safe. An assertive person will go towards. So when we talk about what's best for the relationship oriented thinking and putting our relationships first, I do see a lot of relationships between assertive and withdrawn types. And what's best or easiest for the assertive type is when there's a conflict to go in and fight it out immediately. So we're fighting, something's wrong, something's off, we're disagreeing. Let's like address it right now, like right away. And then what's best, as in most comfortable for the withdrawing type, is to like go by ourselves and process it, often for a really long time, days plus. Well, neither of these tends to be what's best for a relationship between an assertive and withdrawn person. Because if you go to the assertive stance of fight it out right away, our withdrawing folks get almost like a freeze response and we can't express and we don't know what to say and we get kind of confused about our feelings. If we go to the withdrawn person's stance, the assertive person gets driven crazy by that. Why aren't they coming to me? They don't care about the relationship. I really need to resolve this right now. And so it's not best for them either. In this case, what's best is usually a combo where there's an agreement. Okay, we're having this fight, withdrawing person, go process for an hour and then, or, 2, whatever. And then we are coming back and we're working this out. And so it's the withdrawing person's able to show up as their full self, and the assertive person is able to get the kind of like immediate release that they need. So that tends to be the compromise that's best for the relationship in that case. So that's an example with type. What other type examples do you want to share, Lindsay?
Well, I was thinking of just like our type threes, right? And sort of that desire or want to be successful, precious, or impressive. And sometimes what I have seen is that the drive to be these things can be so all consuming that they actually aren't thinking sometimes at times much about themselves or their partner, just this drive to get this thing accomplished or get this thing done or who's the next person I can impress. And I see this can be really hard for relationship dynamics. So sort of that overworker, right? And again, not all threes are going to be this, but I do see this tendency where it's like, again, if we're thinking about what's best for the relationship, so I mean, a lot of this is when they're in their fixated state, right? Like a healthy three isn't going to show up this way, but it's like not being able to really think about the decisions and choices around that relationship dynamic and like, am I taking care of myself? Am I doing what's necessary to have rest so that I can be fully present in my partnership, right? Am I connecting to the partner and not being overly focused on the thing that I want to accomplish or achieve, and really starting to think about sort of how that drive to be that, and even that mask, right? That mask putting on, sometimes they can even do that in their partnership and not be able to be sort of fully transparent or authentic or real with their partner, and there can feel like there's something missing. And so that's one of the things that I see in particular with threes. Anything you would add about threes at all that you see?
No, I think you did a great job. So if threes are doing like relationship oriented thinking, what would you recommend for them?
If they're doing relationship oriented thinking, it would be stopping for a minute and asking yourself, like, is what I'm doing right now what is best for the relationship? Which is recognizing that sometimes that's doing what's best for me, which is taking rest when it's necessary so that I have capacity and ability to connect, and also making sure that other, external ventures, achievements aren't taking away from the connection of the partner. And so making sure that you're present and you're available for the partner. But at the same time, right, this is why this is such a complex idea. We know that you need to have that thing that makes you feel successful in the world to be able to be the partner that people need. And so it's all of that balance sort of within that. And I think it's beautiful when threes do this balance and like really what they can bring to relationship and to themselves when they do this.
Perfect. We were also talking a little bit about nines. So I guess we're have an attachment type theme right now with our examples, but I'll let you talk about nine since you are a nine.
Yeah, I think with nines, it's the merging, right? And I think what was interesting, one of the aha moments that I had more recently here is sometimes we do this merging without even realizing that we're doing it and completely give up sort of our autonomy. I recognize for myself that maybe it's been more with my social groups than with my partners, but like if you were for instance, a sexual nine, you might do it more within the partnership, but it's like almost as if we lose our individual identity completely and we don't have that in the relationship. And that actually isn't going to be the best thing for the relationship. Like we need to have that individual identity, that autonomy. What I see with nines when we don't do that, that also impacts relationship is we get frustrated and irritated, and we can put the blame sometimes on the partner for not giving us any of that capacity to have autonomy when it's really about us. And so it's that ability to have individual identity, that ability to kind of show up in your presence and be able to be assertive and ask for what you need. And so it becomes a lot of, but it's also both, because we also want people in our environment to do what we want them to do. We use energy to control that. And so like, we need to recognize of the both end. Like, are we showing up and having individual identity and advocating and asserting? And are we recognizing how the energy that we put out into the environment might actually not be beneficial for the relationship, and sort of taking responsibility for that through being assertive to ask for what we need or want. So basically what I'm saying, nines, the more assertive, the more presence you have, the more that you're able to kind of ask for your own needs to met, the better the relationship's going to be. And it goes against all the things that we are afraid of. Anything you would add, Sam?
Lindsay, you know what this makes me think of is the conversation we were just having with our friend Ian the other day about when Lindsay, I hope it's okay if I share this, about Lindsay and I were doing a podcast at a certain time, and I was like, oh, can we switch the time? And Lindsay is like, well, like that time that you want to switch it to, like that's actually like when I'm not at my best and I really need rest and I don't think I'm gonna be like the best I can be. And then later she mentioned like how hard that was for her. And I was like, no, your friends and partners of nines were craving you to speak up for yourself. Like it was so great that you did that, because then I could work around like what I knew was best for you. And we found something that worked for both of us. And it was so great. Because of that example, I'm going to make a kind of an update to our system here, because you said, you know, the relationship entity, putting that first. Sometimes it's what's best for one partner. Sometimes it's what's best. I'm going to say it's sometimes what's most comfortable for one partner, and sometimes what's not most comfortable for one partner. You know, best is a little bit of a term that it depends how you define it. So in Enneagram work, we always want to be pushing ourselves to growth. So when we're talking about an example like a self-preservation, repressed person, putting the self-preservation things first because that's what the relationship needs, that's still what's best for me as a self-preservation repressed person, but it's not what's most comfortable or easiest. So I think you can think of this all in a different way too, which is sometimes what's best for your relationship is going to be what's easy for you, and sometimes it's going to be what's hard for you. Probably putting your relationship first is going to push you to growth and be ultimately what's best for you regardless. Um, Anything to add before we move into sex? Because it's Sexy Friday.
I mean, I think it's just interesting what you said, because that, you know, going back on that, it was actually, I mean, we have a very good relationship where I'm comfortable doing that, but I think things that people forget about nines, it's very anxiety provoking, even when I have to do something simple as like, hey, that's not the best time of day for me, and advocate and assert for myself. And it's like one of the things that I often will share is like, as a nine, you are always going to be anxious. I have done a ton of work on myself, and even as something as simple as saying, hey, that's not the best time of day for me, can we not do that? I still have anxiety about doing that, but I recognize one of the things I'll say is like, huge or uncomfortable under uncomfortability right now for longer term peace. You have longer term peace when you assert and advocate yourself, which is significantly beneficial for the relationship and for you. And yes, we do need to be talking about sex, do we not? So I'll let you start a little bit with around the relationship and sexuality piece. I know you were going to talk about sexual instinct and self-preservation.
Yeah, so hopefully you get the overall idea at this point, which is that, sometimes what's best for the relationship is a compromise between your two styles. Sometimes it's, your partner's strength and it's what's easy for them and hard for you. Sometimes it's your strength, it's hard for them, easy for you, etc. So this applies to sex and intimacy, of course, as well. So when we look at, a famous example that I use, because I work with a lot of couples that have a sexual dominant and a self-preservation dominant in the couple. And these stances are so, so different. So the relationship itself needs both outlooks. It needs, a realistic outlook, a realistic idea of what being together for a long time is like, and knowing you're loved by your partner, even if you don't hear it every single day, multiple times a day, you still trust that you're loved. And, the ability to power through these harder times or times of disconnection. All of those things are things that self-preservation dominants are great at naturally. Relationships also need passion. They need this everyday romance. They need this attunement to when the connection is off and, immediately doing something about that. And those are things that sexual dominants are great at. So when we get a relationship between a sexual dominant and a self-preservation dominant, the relationship needs both of those energies. So what's best for the relationship in that case tends to be a combination of what's easy and hard for each partner, because we want to meet in the middle where we have passion, we have, really deep intimacy and connection, we have a lot of attunement to when things are off, and we have a realistic outlook, we have a, ability to power through times that are difficult when we're sexually disconnected, and we're like, well, you know what, we're going to get connected again. So in that case, it's both for both. In a case where we have, like, let's say two sexual dominants in a relationship, what's going to be best for the relationship is to bring in all these self-preservation energies that's not comfortable for either person. So in that case, what's best for the relationship in some cases is going to be hard for both. It's not what's easiest for either person. And ditto when we have two self-preservation dominants. Like Lindsay and I have seen, in cases where there's two self-preservation dominants, often there isn't as much sexual connection, there isn't as much spontaneity around sex, there isn't as much, like everyday intimacy, because that's a weak spot for both people. So ideally, we want to grow towards bringing the sexual instinct in those cases, and that, again, that's going to be a stretch for both. I've worked with, and I am in a relationship of two sexual dominants, and I have also worked with them. And in these cases, we have some, immature decision making around our self-preservation aspects of self and life. And then we also have a lack of the self-preservation instinct around sexuality, meaning if we have a couple of times of not great sex, suddenly we're freaking out, being like, what's wrong with our relationship? Well, we need to bring in this staying power that self-preservations have. And that's going to be a big stretch for both sexual partners, and it's not what's easiest for either partner. So I hope that all made sense. I was a little bit long. Lindsay, what do you have to add there?
I don't know if I have anything to add. I just think what you're bringing up is really essential and really important, because this is where, when we've talked about the sexuality piece before in the Enneagram, the instincts are the framework, right? And the type comes in and creates the nuance. And in my practice, very similar to your practice, it is often the sexual instinct dominant and self-preservation dominant in the relationship together, and how do we navigate that. But I love how you brought up also, just like if we are the same too, we still need to bring in some of those ones that we don't touch point with as much, to create more of that stability, to create more of that what's best for the relationship, to have that long-standing connection, bonding, and long-term relationship lasting. So I just think that was such an essential thing that you brought in there. I had a couple types I was just going to touch on because we got to bring in some types and talk a little bit about. So it'll be a very quick point. But my first one was thinking of type 7, which Sam has actually talked a little bit before about, sex is play, it's playfulness, and that sometimes it can be harder for them to have that kind of deeper connection or even snuggle and cuddle after sex is happening. And just like that ability to sort of recognize, like, well, what does your partner need in sex as well? Because for 7, sexuality can be a little bit more about what I need and want sometimes than it can be about what the partner needs and wants. And so that ability to ask yourself, what's best for the relationship around sex right now? Am I able to recognize the partner that I'm having sex with and what they need? Maybe they don't want as much playfulness. Maybe they want more romantic, connected, bonded sex, right? Maybe they want me to snuggle and cuddle them afterwards, even if I'm going to cry. But that vulnerability of that crying is going to create that bigger bonding and connection sort of in that relationship. And so what I think about for 7s is we may need to think a little bit more about what our partners need in sex versus as much more about what we need in sex. Anything you would add for 7? I know I'm putting the poor 7s on the spot, but I do love their playfulness and their
Yeah, and
ability to just have
we'll
fun.
put a couple other ones on the spot too, because I know you're going to talk about 6s, and I just thought of something for 4s if we can fit it in. But yeah, for 7s, they want to keep it at this light place. But I've talked a bunch about how if they go to the deeper place that some of these other types want to go to, it actually brings an immense amount of transformation for them. So again, I think it's probably what's best for the 7 as well as their relationship to push themselves to this deeper place, but it's certainly not going to be what's comfortable. And, in order to push yourself there, like Lindsay said, you want to stay with the feelings that come up with lovemaking. Don't jump out of bed and go to the next thing, and feel what's coming up. And, as long as you're with a trusted person, let them hold that with you. What about,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was going to talk a little bit about our 6s. So one of the things with 6s that we've talked about is that they need a lot of preparedness around sexuality, that they're very open to sort of that capacity to do anything and go anywhere sexually, but it's like they need to know what it is and kind of be prepared for it for when it's going to happen. And so my thoughts came with this. It's like that preparedness really is what's best for the relationship for both partners. And part of it is, again, going outside that comfort zone. It's the ability for the 6 to be able to ask for that is what they're needing and wanting. Also, them being an attachment type, there can be some fear of like actually bringing that up or talking about that or recognizing that. And that also as a partner, of a 6, kind of keeping that in the back of your head, like, 6s need to be more prepared. Like they're going to want to have the conversation outside of the sexual experience, but that they're willing to go there with me if I'm able to have that. And so really, again, just kind of thinking about what is best for the relationship, and what's best for the relationship around sexuality for 6 is some preparedness, and some reassurance that like I know what's going to happen. And they can't, which is the interesting thing about them is it's like you can talk about it 2 weeks ahead of time and they can have an idea, and then when you have the sexual experience and you go there, they can go there with you, but they will get frustrated and angry with you if you like spring something on them sexually in the moment. And so just kind of being aware of that. And part of it might be that they need to get a little bit more comfortable with things being a little bit more spontaneous and in the moment as well. And so that ability to like, especially if say they're like with a 7 who needs more novelty, right? That ability to sort of meet the other partner's needs as well. And so it becomes some compromising. A lot of sexuality piece actually becomes a lot of compromising versus like what's best for me or what's best for you is one of the things that I've found. I don't know if you found that as well, Sam, but it does seem to be more compromising.
Definitely. And I think that's largely what we're speaking about. What's best for the relationship in a lot of cases is a compromise between the two positions. However, there's some cases where what's best for the relationship is more aligned to what one of the people is already good at doing. And in that case, the partner who's doing a bigger stretch might feel a little bit resentful, like, why am I having to push myself so hard and the other person isn't? And it's like, well, it's going to flip in other aspects of your life. It's going to be the other way. It is sometimes the case that whatever we're trying to build here, if we're trying to build passion, the sexual dominant partner is already going to be better at that. If we're trying to build realism, the self-preservation partner is already going to be better at that. So it does depend, but I find that it's mostly compromise. We have a couple minutes, so I'll add in an example about fours. So our fours are one of our higher desire types, and they tend to report that they like a certain kind of sexual experience, which is this soul level connection, this like deeply seeing and deeply being seen, at almost like the core of my being. And even if they've just met the person that they're having a sexual experience with, they really want that feeling. Well, I found that when a four is partnered with a positive outlook type, like 7 or 9 or 2, um, these folks are a little more light and a little more positive and a little more playful, especially sevens, but even nines as well, with their sexuality. And fours can feel disappointed. Like, why aren't you going to this like deep and connected and like so meaningful? Like, why is it, or why are we being playful? That's not real connection. Well, being playful is a way of connecting. It's just not four's preferred way. So in this case, within the sexuality, I think what's best for the relationship again is to incorporate some of both, for fours to change their view, expand their view of connection to include playfulness. And we can always have, our sevens, nines, and twos working on going like a little deeper, a little darker, a little bit of these lower layers or these sad emotions or some of the things they're avoiding in sex, to become more comfortable with that. So again, it's a compromise in those cases. Anything to add, Lindsay?
No, I completely agree with you with fours, and you have a really good point, sort of pointing that out.
You can imagine there are so many type combinations. So you can imagine like this has a lot of variety to it. If you have questions about your specific type and your partner's type or instinct, you can message us, to ask about it, because obviously we could barely cover any of the many combinations. It's already the end of Sexy Friday.
They go so quickly, do they not?
Yeah. So we want to share what's coming up. We are excited to be starting a type series next. So, starting in June with type 9, we're going to be doing a Sexy Friday each month for every type. Starting with 9 in June, 8 in July, we'll have sometimes special guests of that type, and we'll be going in depth on, all the subtypes of that type and what they're like sexually and what they need and how they express. So we're going really in depth now, but definitely attend not just your type, definitely your partner's type if you have one. And, some of this is just useful and interesting information, even if you're not partnered with that type. So we are excited about that coming up starting next month.
And I put out a poll not that long ago around interest in around workshops on Enneagram and sexuality, and it seems like quite a few of you are actually quite interested in that and having Sam and I do more stuff around that. And so we are looking at in September that we will be doing a workshop on that. We don't know all the full details or the date yet, but just kind of keep your eyes open if that is something that you really want to be a part of. You can always just message us as well, as we start to kind of put it out to order and things like that. But we're really excited to be able to be bringing this as well, and then to start to be able to focus a little bit more, and then that can be, your questions can be answered in more depth there because you'll have us, and then. Yes, I can't believe how quickly the time always goes, but then we will see you in June to start type 9, which is my type. So we'll put type 9s on the spot around sexuality. If there are any specific questions that you really wanted to know around type 9 and sexuality that you want to hope that we get to on that episode, just DM myself or Sam, and we'll make sure that we answer those questions. So this is your opportunity to kind of get specific questions asked around certain types. And we'll be going kind of go 9, 8, kind of one little bit of a different. We're not starting at 1, we're starting at 9 instead. And so, we know 9, 1. I even said that wrong. Sorry, it'd be 9, 1. We're starting with 9 and going around. So you just let us know, or 9 backwards, aren't we? I'm confusing myself today. We're going backwards. So it goes 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'll figure this out today. So you can get an idea. So it'll be 9 in June and 8 in July, and then 7 in August, and then so forth. So just kind of keep us posted and ask those questions around that. And we'll see you next month in June. Have a great Friday. Take care, everybody. Thank you for joining
Bye.
us. Bye,
Bye,
Sam.
Dee.